Hi, everyone. This is Raquel.
Hi, and this is Jennifer.
Welcome to Madness Cafe.
This is a feminist podcast where we talk about women's issues, politics, and health and wellness.
And where those issues intersect. Hey, everybody. Welcome back to Madness Cafe. Today, it's another installment of our banned book series. And this month, Jennifer and I are reading, maybe I should back up so y'all can see it. We're reading MAUS by Art Spiegelman. And this was published in two volumes 1 and 2. And what I'm holding up is the 2-volume set in one. But volume 1 was published 1973-ish, and volume 2 was 1981-ish. And then this putting it together in one set, the way that I held up, was like 87-ish. Yeah. But MAUS by Art Spiegelman is a graphic novel of basically Art Spiegelman interviewing his father, Vladek Spiegelman, about being a Polish Jew living in Poland leading up to the Holocaust, and then also his father's time at Auschwitz, and then getting out of Auschwitz, being liberated, and then eventually coming to the US via Sweden, I believe. Yeah.
I think that's right.
So in it, along with him interviewing his dad about what happened, it's also portraying Art's relationship with his dad and the tension that is there between the two of them, and the tumultuous relationship between the two of them, which is a kind way of putting it. This book has been, or series of books, as I'm showing up here, was banned. It got a lot of flack pretty much from the beginning when the first volume came out. Like, because when this came out in 73, when the first volume came out, there weren't very many people talking about the Holocaust at that time. And I kept forgetting that when I was reading it. Because when I was reading it, I was like, all these people are saying that this is this groundbreaking, whatever. We know about the Holocaust, whatever. But in 1973, people really weren't talking about it very much. He got a lot of flack for this because people were like, why are you talking about this? This is a horrible topic. Why are you talking about this? We don't need to talk about this. Just let it go. Let it die. And he was like, nope, don't feel that way. And then right around that time, like mid to late 70s, I don't know if you remember, but there started being all of the movies and like TV movies and things like that about the Holocaust and survivors and that sort of thing. So people started talking about it more. But in 2022, God, in Tennessee, my home state, in Tennessee, gotta love it, which I do. I love my home state. But there was a couple in Tennessee in 2022 who moved to have it banned because there's one scene. There's literally one square, whatever. I'm not using the right terminology for a graphic novel, but there's one square where literally it's depicting when Vladek finds Anja, that's Artie's mother, in the bathtub when she had committed suicide. And the people were banning, or they said that they were banning it because it showed her bare breasts.
Her nudity.
Yeah, and honestly, I literally had to go back and go, what are they talking about? I didn't even notice that.
No, because it's very small.
It's very, very small. But
so
anywho, that's the backstory of said book
it's
that we are going to
actually
discuss.
can't really show it. It's actually,
let's see, what page is that on?
Right. Oh, so much for a blurred background. I can't show shit. Anyway, it's tiny. And I'm thinking that we all know that books are being banned for reasons that maybe aren't really the reason people want them banned, because there's not a whole lot of
Mm-hmm.
nudity in this book.
Mm-hmm.
But I do think, to go back to people giving him a lot of flack, I think people gave him a lot of flack for a couple reasons. Granted,
Mm-hmm.
I wasn't around, so this is just me thinking what I think.
Yeah.
But I think, number one, to do such a somber, horrific topic in comic
Mm-hmm.
form, but
Mm-hmm.
then also because in the United States, we think of comics as, ha ha, that's funny,
Yep. Mm-hmm.
right? Which
Mm-hmm.
doesn't necessarily, it's an unfortunate name.
Right.
Also, because he depicted the characters as animals. So
Yeah.
all of the Jewish people in the books are mice.
Mm-hmm.
All of the Nazis are cats.
Mm-hmm.
And it's metaphorical, but it's also, I suppose people could easily look at that and be like, why is he doing that? Although I personally
Mm-hmm.
thought it was very powerful. Even though this is a graphic novel, comic form, I found the book kind of difficult to read emotionally.
Mm-hmm.
But I gather, I would think that's in the early years, maybe that's why people were having a problem with the
Mm-hmm.
topic.
Mm-hmm.
And this whole nonsense of, why did they ban it? Why did they ban it? White supremacy.
Yeah, exactly. 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 Yeah. Yeah. When I was reading the book, like you, I found it very powerful that different groups of people were depicted as different animals. That sometimes some of the mice, some of the Jews were shown with a pig mask,
Yeah, yeah,
trying to basically blend in with the Polish people who were not Jewish.
yes.
I thought that was really interesting, but it didn't really hit me until I was trying to describe the book to somebody who hadn't heard of it, and I was, saying, well, it's a graphic novel, and so but the people are portrayed or drawn as different animals. And as I was telling her, I was like, telling this to somebody doesn't it's not conveying what he was trying to do. I wasn't very good at conveying why he did it that way. And so I kind of went down a little rabbit hole and tried to find specifically why he portrayed people's animals and why specific animals for specific groups. And
Yeah.
so I came across this basically it's like a teaching guide for teachers and educators using the guide to teach MAUS 1 and 2 to their students. So I'm just going to read it. It's a little long, but I think it's really important to understand why art used different animals. So it says depicting Jews as mice is analogous to the way in which Adolf Hitler referred to Jews as vermin. Thus, the Nazis' negative beliefs about Jews as dirty, sneaky, and disease carrying apply. Because cats are natural predators of mice, the use of cats to depict the German Nazis logically follows. Cats' penchant for not merely catching mice for food for survival, but instead as sport and further torturing mice for their own fun reinforces the treatment of Jews by Nazis. Non-Jewish Poles are depicted as pigs, which is both an allusion to Hitler's terming the Poles swine and a nod to the unkosher aspect of pork. In this way, non-Jewish Poles and Jews do not mix, and
Oh,
readers are
that's
reminded
clever.
of right, and readers are reminded of the ways in which Germans rewarded non-Jewish Poles for their relinquishing of Jews and hiding. Other animals, such as dogs to depict Americans and fish to depict the British, reinforce global notions as well. In using animals, Spiegelman also invites the reader to consider the ways that racism and othering have operated throughout history and reminds readers that in order to exterminate a person, that person must be dehumanized. I thought that was very, very powerful, and definitely much better put than I put it when I was trying to explain that to a friend of mine about the book.
Well, I'm glad that you found that and read it, because I didn't actually know that Art Spiegelman had done that so deliberately. I
Hmm.
thought that it was more of a subconscious kind of
Hmm.
coming up with uh not stereotypes, that's not the right word, but
Like representations.
v- um yeah, kind of, but more like a visual cue. I
Hmm.
don't know what I'm saying.
No, no,
um
that makes sense. That makes sense.
I think it's really interesting just to note that we could be at a similar point in history when we
Hmm.
have Donald Trump calling people, what did he
Vermin.
call? I mean, vermin, same kind of thing. It's almost like he took the playbook and is
Hmm.
like using it, and we are starting to see people disappear. It's actually fucking scary.
Hmm. Hmm. It's incredibly frightening. It's incredibly frightening. And the the othering and the dehumanizing, and seeing people as animals as opposed to humans is all part of it's all part of the plan.
I mean, we've seen it before, and it seems to work. If you can think of another group of people as an enemy, as
Hmm.
different from yourself, as not part of the whole. The word vermin is so specific because you start to think about disease carrying critters in the night. What do you think the Americans as dogs? What does dog signify? Because like, to me, I've thought of it two ways. Like, what a dog, like what a kind of like jerk or ugly. That could be
Hmm.
one way of saying it. Or also, like, a dog is your best friend, is the person that like travels with you in your van when you're out. Like,
Yeah.
your dog is your comfort and your. What do you think he meant with the dog? To be fair, there wasn't a whole lot of reference to dogs or Americans in the book.
Yeah. The only one that stood out to me of a dog representing a person was when Vladek was driving along with Art and his wife Francoise, and they were like, "Oh, there's a hitchhiker. Let's pick him up." And it was a black person
Oh
who was
yeah, I
depicted
remember
as a
that
dog,
scene.
and that hit me hard. I'm like, okay, first you're gonna have the black person be a dog, and then Vladek goes basically, racist ape shit. That was very upsetting to me. And it brought up to me, as Francoise and Art point out, how can you be racist against somebody? You sound like the Nazis talking about Jews.
It just shows you. I thought that scene was actually quite brilliant.
Hmm.
And also, we know that this was his biography, that this actually happened, that these
Hmm.
scenes with his father, this is
Hmm.
not something that he made up. This is
Right.
something that happened between them. And so, this scene in the car, they did pick up a black man
Hmm.
who, white or black, would have been depicted as a dog, right? Because they were American.
Well, from what they're saying here, but I didn't realize that
Ah,
until I found this part, because I don't remember seeing really
there
any
weren't
other
very
dogs.
many. There
Yeah.
were later in the book when the Americans came at the end of the
Ah,
war.
right,
There
right,
were
right, right.
dogs,
That's
but
right.
I can see how that would have been like, whoa. But
Yeah.
also, I feel like it really does show, sadly, how this is kind of a human characteristic that I believe we can evolve out of, and some people have evolved out of it, but it's like there is this tribalism, like one group hates one group, hates one group, hates one group. And so he
Mm-hmm.
was very oppressed, almost exterminated. Also,
Mm-hmm.
that's another MAUS term, right? Almost
Right.
exterminated. His All of his family killed.
Mm-hmm.
except for him and then his wife's family and his brother. And
And a lot of his wife's family was killed.
then he can turn that same vitriol on another person, on a person of
Mm-hmm.
color. It's
Mm-hmm.
like you do wonder, how can you? But then you also see this is the shadow, the dark side of human nature that is
Mm-hmm.
not, it's it's not a pretty characteristic of humans.
Mm-hmm.
And again, I'll say, I think we can evolve out of it. I think some people have. Some people are seeing that we're all one, that when we hurt one
Mm-hmm.
person, we hurt others, but other
Mm-hmm.
people are stuck in this tribalism. And I think personally, I think people like Trump are not really stuck in tribalism. I think he
Mm-hmm.
uses tribalism to get power. He sees how it motivates people.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas I think
No, I will disagree. I think he is stuck in tribalism himself. Yeah, he's
you
stuck
do.
in it and he knows how to utilize it.
See, I don't know, because I feel like our early years of Trump, when he was like on TV all the time before he got into
Mm-hmm.
this presidential shit, I don't really recall him having white supremacist rhetoric. I don't really recall him being religious per se. I don't really recall
Uh,
him being anti-abortionist.
he was, he has always been racist. Do you remember hearing about the Central Park Five? Do
Oh
you?
yeah, I do remember that. I
He
do
took out
remember
a
he was,
full page
he
ad. I think
did.
it was
You're
in the New
right.
York Times
You're right. I forgot
calling for
about
the
that.
death penalty for children.
You're
These
right.
kids, first of all, they weren't guilty. They didn't do any of this.
No, they did not.
Second, they were like anywhere, I think they were from like 13 to 15 years old, and he was
You're
calling for the
right.
death penalty for
You're
them.
right. You're right. I forgot about all
Yeah.
that. I bow down. You are right. You're right. I forgot. I was thinking he was just a master manipulator, which he continues to be.
Yeah,
However,
yeah,
you're right.
yeah,
You're right. He
yeah,
is racist as fuck. I
yeah,
forgot.
yeah, yeah.
Okay, so back to the novel.
Yes.
I think one of the reasons why it was difficult for me to read was because this was so highly emotional, in that it was two stories woven
Mm-hmm.
together.
Mm-hmm.
It was the story of Vladek and Anya in the Holocaust,
Mm-hmm.
but it was also the story of Artie as a
Mm-hmm.
kid,
Mm-hmm.
and his parents, and especially his father, and how their relationship interweaves. It also had the story, small part of it, of Anya's suicide.
Yeah.
All of these pieces intertwining together with some pretty heavy shit.
Mm-hmm. And the whole thing about his older brother who
Yes.
died before he was even born, who he never knew, but he was still living basically in the shadow of Rishu, who died as a little, was killed as a little boy in the concentration camps. And so living with that hanging
Well,
over him as
he
well.
didn't quite make it to the concentration camp. Remember, he was with a aunt or a cousin, and as they were coming to get him and the kids, she poisoned all of them.
Okay, I think I might be misremembering it then because I thought for some reason that the aunt poisoned herself and her own children
And
and Rishu.
Rishu, because
Okay.
he was in their care.
Right.
It
Okay,
was
okay.
just her and the kids, and she made a decision. She knew their fate. What a
Mhm.
horrible decision to have to make.
I know.
But yet, if you think about it in terms of suffering, she was thinking, how much suffering do I want these kids to have to?
Hmm.
One of the hardest parts of the book to read was when they were describing what actually happened in the showers
Hmm.
in the
Yeah,
concentration camps. And a lot
yeah,
of women and children got sent to the showers.
yeah, yeah,
They talked about the bodies being close to the doors because
hmm,
people were trying to get out. They talked
yeah,
about fingers and arms being broken because people were trying to get out. They
yeah,
talked about people standing on each other
yeah.
as they were trying to get out. It's so cruel. And so that part was really hard to read. And I just have to like, where's your humanity?
Well, they didn't see them as human.
I know,
And
but I just, I
which
can't.
I am not condoning. This was fucking awful and horrific, and there is no justification.
Oh my
Yeah,
God, it just makes me sick to my stomach.
so like I said, when I was reading it, I kept forgetting when it was published or when it was first published, and that at that time, not very many people knew that much about what really happened, and that there weren't very many survivors who were talking at that point. But I knew a lot of this. Most of this was not new to me. The part that really hit me, and I think it was partly it was the oh my God, how can you do this to another person? But it was also I didn't know that that had happened. I think it was toward the end, right before the camps were liberated, and the Germans knew that the Americans and the Russians were coming to liberate the camps. And so they were trying to kill as many Jews as they could as quickly as they could. And there were the trains of Jews from Hungary that were coming, and they were just like throwing them into pits, right? And I didn't know because I knew that there had been mass graves. I knew about that, but I did not know that people, Jews, were forced into those mass graves alive and then burned alive. I
Oh
did not
yeah.
know that. I did not know that.
That scene
And
was
that, oh, yeah, that was really, really
that scene as
difficult.
he described it as
Mhm.
the fat burning and then
Yes.
scooping the fat onto the bodies
Mm-hmm.
is
Mm-hmm.
like you would do when you're cooking an animal.
Mm-hmm.
You know,
Mm-hmm.
you're adding
Yeah.
the fat.
Yeah.
Oh
You're
my,
basting it basically. The way that Art tells the story is the wrong word. The way that he tells his father's history is so straightforward and blunt and to the point. There's no rose-colored glasses. There's no like innuendo. It's
nope.
just here's what happens. And I think one of the things that I consider so groundbreaking about this book is that the graphic novel form is used to relay what happened. And I think in that way, it's it's maybe more accessible for people, or maybe it's easier for people to digest it in this form, I think, in that it's drawn, that it's in the illustration type as opposed to photos. And I think
Yeah.
maybe in that way it can be a little, God, everything that I say is going to seem completely ridiculous, but maybe in this way as a graphic novel there's a lower barrier of entry so that people can come to it a little easier. Does that make sense?
Maybe I found it really difficult to read.
Yeah. And his and by saying that this is illustrated and it's a graphic novel, it's still very stark. I mean, his drawings are like the drawing on page 70 of the the underground room where the people would go to undress because they're thinking, oh, we're going to go have showers now.
So awful.
And there's signs saying, oh, remember which number hook you put your clothes on so you get the right clothes when you get out. There was no getting out.
Yeah, our pages don't match up. We have two different volumes.
Dang it. Okay,
That's
so
okay. That's okay. It's good. It's God. It's
okay,
good.
okay. But anywho, so because I'm in volume 2 right now and looking on page 70. I don't know if that matches up for yours.
No, because volume 2 goes into,
Oh, you have it all as one book.
yeah,
Oh, I have them as 2 books,
yeah,
but in one, just like this thingy. Okay,
yeah.
all right, that makes sense now. Okay. But you know what? As we're sitting here and we're talking about this and we're talking about how difficult it was to read it and how difficult it is to know that there are people who lived through that, people who survived it. There are people who are saying that books like this should be banned because people feel uncomfortable when they read these things,
Oh,
right?
yeah,
Right. Like what we're saying is like, I could see them going, well, see, that's why it should be banned. Well,
yeah.
no, because you know what? Life is not always comfortable. And you need to know the truth. And if you can't learn to handle the the truth of what has happened in society, if you can't learn to sit with negative feelings and then there's no hope for you to learn empathy. And I think that books like this that show you what happens and in this case in a nonfiction account, but whether it's nonfiction or a fictional account or whatever, you're not going to die because you feel discomfort. That's one of the reasons why I get so upset when people say, oh, well, we can't have, little Johnny and little Susie Q learning about this because it's going to make them feel bad. What about all the little kids
What
who were
about,
Jewish who died in the Holocaust? They weren't spared.
no,
And I'm not, it's not a justification. I'm just saying that these things happen and people should know about them.
yeah. And here's the thing. They had this book, I don't know if they still do, but this book was part of a curriculum in school. So
Mm-hmm.
people would read it, discuss it
Mm-hmm.
when they were at the correct age appropriate discussions about
Mm-hmm.
history, what happened.
Right.
And for me, a couple of things happened in this book. And like I said, I thought it was really difficult to read, but there were a couple big realizations that I had. Number one is that there were a lot of people that
Mm-hmm.
helped along
Mm-hmm.
the way. There were a lot of dangerous situations. People were hiding them in their
Mm-hmm.
houses, even though they knew if they got caught doing that, that they would die also.
Mm-hmm.
There were people that were feeding them. There were
Mm-hmm.
people that were making deals. There were people that were helping each other, albeit a lot of it was trades and etc. that was going on. There were jobs that were given. There were preferences that were given that allowed for their possible survival.
Mm-hmm.
And I think of the time that we're in right now, and God, I hope this does not progress to anything like the Holocaust, but we already have people of color being rounded up and
Mm-hmm.
put on planes, not trains, but
Mm-hmm.
planes, and sent to, where are they getting sent to?
Uh, uh, El Salvador.
El Salvador, to prisons. And we're seeing pictures of these people,
Mm-hmm.
men,
Mm-hmm.
bent over, stripped of their clothing, wearing
Mm-hmm.
their underwear, shackled,
Yeah.
and pressed up against one another, and those pictures are very reminiscent of the photos from the Holocaust.
Mm-hmm.
And we're watching it happen. And what are we doing? Are we helping? Are we not helping? Are people speaking out? Are they not speaking out? Are
Right.
people saying it's okay? Are people saying it's not okay? To me, this is a moment in history that the reason people need to read this book is so, number one, so they can recognize propaganda when they see it. I don't
Yeah.
know that we can, but
Mm-hmm.
number two, that we can question. We hear the rhetoric of dehumanizing, their vermin.
Mm-hmm.
That should send off a red flag. A red
Mm-hmm.
flag. People are not vermin.
Mm-hmm. And
People are not
and that did
garbage.
for a lot of people. A lot of people did call that out in the very early times of Trump using that kind of language, and people were like, "Oh, you're just grasping at straws, poo poo," and they're like, "Okay, fine." And then this next go round of Trump, there we go, and people are like, "Oh, we get it now."
But we are at a tipping point, right? What are people doing? What are people saying? How I don't know how I don't know how we stop this from becoming a Holocaust. All I'm saying is, if we didn't read this book, we wouldn't even know. Not this book in
Exactly.
particular, but books like it.
Right, right.
If we
If we
didn't,
weren't taught about the Holocaust in school, we wouldn't know.
right.
And
And
even still, there are people to this day, young people, who are saying that the Holocaust was a hoax.
Holocaust deniers.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And
But they're probably being taught that. That's what they're being taught, because they're not, because books are banned and they're only allowed to read what is offered to them, right?
yeah.
So that's what they believe. I mean, we talked to several women who were born in high control religions who
Yeah.
said that they weren't allowed to read anything other than that was given to them.
Right.
And they believed that feminism was this
It
crazy
was
women hate
bad.
program,
Yeah.
and they didn't know anything about racism, and they didn't know anything about how our country was a colonized country. They didn't
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
understand. So that is the process of withholding information from people. But what I'm saying, one of the things I learned in this book is that even in the worst of situations,
Mm-hmm.
there were people who took chances with their own lives
Yeah.
to say, hey, I'm going to do what I can to feed you, clothe you, shelter you. I will try to hide you. I will try to
Mm-hmm.
sneak you out of the country. Thank God for brave and honorable people. And
Mm-hmm.
also, there were people who didn't. There were people
Yeah.
who chose to look the other way. And one of the interesting things I found about this book is when the Americans came and they were released and they were marching away and they
Mm-hmm.
marched through towns, he said
Yeah.
something like, I didn't realize for other people, life just went on,
Yeah.
that life just continued like normal. While
Mm-hmm.
they were off in the concentration camps, people
Mm-hmm.
were eating dinner, kids were going to school, going to your job every day, to your 9 to 5, paying your bills, doing the same stuff. Well, that's what we're doing now that these guys are, where'd you say they
Mm-hmm.
were?
El
El
Salvador.
Salvador. Now
Yeah.
that these guys are in El Salvador,
Mm-hmm.
we're getting up every day, we're eating dinner, we're going to our jobs, we're
Yeah.
like, this is a turning point in history. I think everybody should read this fucking book right now.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
Absolutely.
and what do? We have to use our mouths, our voices, we have to put memes on social media. We have to show up at protests. We have to do podcasts. We have to talk about it. We have to say,
Yeah.
no, you can,
We
no,
have to speak out in any way that we can. I'd like to think that in this day and age, with the advances that we have and the protections that we still have, don't know for how much longer, but the protections that we still have, that it is easy isn't the right word, but it's possible for people to stand up in more ways and to use their voice or their platform or their dollars or whatever to show that they are not standing for a new Holocaust. We're not standing for, people just being rounded up and shipped away for the rest of their lives to, one of the worst prisons in the world in a country that they've never been to, where they know no one and they have no access to due process.
No due process.
Yeah. And so I hope that in that way that this time will be different than leading up to World War II. That I hope that people take advantage of the fact that there are more ways to stand up and show that you're not going to sit by and let this shit happen. Back then, people didn't have the ability to do these things, right? Maybe they did well before, all the rights were, started being taken away or, whatever. Maybe, I don't know. But I just think that there are benefits to living in the time that we live in now. The world is more connected and interconnected, so we can voice our support. We can see and hear and feel the support from other people, from other countries saying, hey, we know this shit is happening, we know what y'all are, hey, we're here to support y'all, we're going to protest too. This isn't happening in a vacuum the way that it did in 1930s Poland and Germany and in Hungary. And sadly, frighteningly, Trump is trying to take us back to that. He's trying to, this whole make America great again and make America, America first, that's isolationism. If we let this happen, if we let this run rampant, we are just fertilizing the soil for shit like the Holocaust to happen again, because we will then be isolated. Our rights will be taken away. Our access to information will be taken away. This is a slippery fucking slope. Banning books is, the good guys don't ban books.
They say that if you want to be on the right side of history, you don't ban books.
Exactly.
If you feel comfortable stating your case and having a decent discussion, then you shouldn't be afraid of somebody reading a book. You
Mm-hmm.
just have a discussion and a debate about, what's going on.
Yeah.
Yeah. Was there anything surprising or something you didn't like about the book?
One thing that was maybe sometimes a little uncomfortable for me was how frustrated Art would get with his dad and how fraught their relationship was. But, that's real life. I get it. The tension that I think in their relationship was also, that was evidence of the trauma that Vladek had lived through. It was basically showing that some experiences don't leave you,
Oh,
and they then impact future generations.
Epigenetics, man.
Yeah, and intergenerational trauma is real.
Well, I think it's real on two levels. I think it's real on our cellular level
Mm-hmm.
that we pick that up really through our genetics,
Right.
but it's also real in our interpersonal relationships.
Mm-hmm.
Talking about how cheap his father was, Vladek, how
Mm-hmm.
cheap he was, and how he
Mm.
he didn't even want to buy matches. He would take
Yeah.
the free ones that you can get at bars and stuff like
Yeah.
that. But then when you think of how he really used that skill to survive,
Yeah. Yeah. Because he would use those things he would trade
yeah,
for basically his survival.
to me, he created a body memory of
Mm-hmm.
how to utilize things basically to survive. So of course he doesn't want to waste anything anywhere,
Mm-hmm.
anyhow.
Mm-hmm.
And that would be really hard for someone who didn't survive that to understand, like, hey, why can't I just use a match?
Right. Right. There was another thing, now that we're talking about it, that really, when it was brought up in the book, I was like, oh, oh, damn, I didn't think about that. When Art is talking to his therapist, Pavel, and Art is talking about how resourceful his dad was, and all this, it was his cunning and yeah, some luck, but it was his cunning and resourcefulness and presence of mind, that's how he survived. And Pavel says, and I'm paraphrasing, do you think that the people who survived are more admirable than the people who didn't? When that question was posed, I was like, oh
Yeah.
shit, I didn't think about
Yeah.
that.
Because there was a fair amount of luck, wrong place, wrong time, right place, right time.
Hmm.
Uh, so many things.
Yeah, we hear, and this is brought up in some of the study guide type stuff that I looked at, that there's so much that's talked about from the perspective of the survivors, but it's important that we not forget the people who didn't survive,
Millions.
and not just as a group of 6 million, right? That these were individual people, that there were families, that these were lives.
And there could have been many, 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 many of those people that were just as cunning, just
Mm-hmm.
as creative, just as outgoing, just as thoughtful, just as smart. They just didn't happen to be in the right place at the right time,
Right.
or they happened to be in the wrong place at the wrong time. And when Vladek talks
Yeah.
about his father, how his father was in the line when they split people,
Mm-hmm.
and if you went left, you were going probably to the gas chambers, and if you went right, you were going to work because you were
Mm-hmm.
healthy. And his father was going to work, but then he saw his daughter and her children, his grandchildren, on
Mm-hmm.
the other side, and he jumped the fence to the wrong side to be with her.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and
Like,
so he
does
lost
that
his dad and his sister
but does
and
that
nieces
make
and
him
nephews.
any less worthy, any less cunning, any
Right.
less smart, any less creative? No,
Right.
he made a choice to be there with his, to probably hold her hand. That makes me
Right.
want to cry.
Yeah.
That actually
Yeah.
makes me want to cry.
Yeah. Yeah.
He jumped the fence to be with her.
Thinking about that, it puts into perspective for me the mom who said, I'm not going to let my kids go through this. And so she poisoned her children and herself.
Yeah, of course.
I get
Does
it.
that make her any less worthy, any less human, any less smart,
Mm-mm,
any less cunning?
mm-mm.
Probably just as cunning, just as smart, just as, I can't believe I'm crying. But
Well,
I just,
it's a horrible situation. Yeah, I mean it's a horrendous situation. We're talking about the generational impact of all of that. I keep thinking about A few years ago when all of those families were separated at the border, and there's still what, like 1,500 kids who haven't been returned to their families because they don't know. And I just think, what damage has been done to those kids, to those parents, to those families, and to the generations after them? And when people say, oh, slavery was, that was over hundreds of years ago, fuck you.
Keeping it
That
real.
trauma, that trauma lives on. That's not to say that people haven't gone on to live good lives and find love and find joy and whatever. Yeah, okay, yeah, all those things still happen. But in spite of and along with the
Yeah.
trauma that still exists, if people don't read these books, if people don't know what other people go through or what other people's lives are like, you you don't understand the present the way that you should. You certainly don't understand the past the way that you should. And I'm sorry, but I don't think that you'll be able to vision a future as it should be.
I think that's beautifully put, Raquel.
Thank you. And not reading these books, not knowing about other people, not knowing about other cultures, that's damaging to you as an individual as well, because
It's a
you then you don't grow that ability to empathize. There's knowledge that you don't get. You are a less full and less actualized human being because you choose not to know something, or because somebody has chosen for you that you don't get to know that information.
yeah.
And why would somebody sit still for somebody else to stunt their actualization, to stunt their ability to become all that they can be? Why would you sit still for that? Why do people sit still for books being banned? Fuck fear. That's bullshit. Why are you so afraid?
Yes. Read banned books. Yeah. Raquel
Absolutely.
said it all. No, like, yeah. Like, hell to the yeah.
Get beyond your own fucking nose. It won't kill you to learn something.
No, it will actually make you a better person.
It will make you a better person.
Right. It will make you a better person. Every single banned book that we've read, there's a reason it's being banned.
Hmm.
And mostly that's because it's about humanity.
Hmm.
And for whatever reason, people are trying to kill humanity, I guess. And
People are just fucking fearful and full of hate. Not all people,
and
but a
and
lot of people.
and all these books that we're reading are exceptional.
Oh my God, yes.
They're exceptional. And the reason that they're being banned is because they're powerful. They
Hmm.
make you think, they make you feel, they make you learn, they make you more human. They add to our humanity. And
Hmm.
that's the real reason why these books are being banned.
Yeah.
Because so I would say to everyone, just read banned books.
Why would, again, I'm going back to why does somebody sit still and let another person tell them that they are not allowed to think about something
Well,
and to
most of
learn
those
about something?
most of those people targeted are children or oppressed people or people who don't have access to
Yeah.
the internet or to schools, or they're being controlled by religion or by patriarchy or by their families, religious
Well,
control. So, like, a lot of the people who are affected by the banned book, They're people without power.
Right. But I will also add that the people who want to ban books want to ban them for everyone, not
Yeah.
just children, not just people in high control religions, but for everybody. They don't want adults to read these books, right?
Well,
Oh,
there's
so we can't make decisions for ourselves. I mean, I can go out and, work a job and pay taxes and keep the
no,
economy going, right? For people who are really gung-ho about banning books, they just want to take them out of everywhere. They don't want Amazon to sell them. They don't want libraries to have them. They
they
don't
took them
want
out of the
bookstores.
military
Yeah,
last week.
yeah. What is it? West Point? Yeah, West
Yeah,
Point doesn't have it. I mean, all of this shit, although Mein Kampf is still at West Point.
right.
But
Does
what
that
the
does
fuck?
that does that show you why and who? That shows
Exactly.
you why and who and why this book is so important.
Yeah.
That shows you why.
When you take these books out of places where people can access them easily, like libraries, then you're also taking the ability to learn and to grow from people who can't afford to just go buy the book.
Woman, we are arguing the same point.
I know, I know.
there's
I'm
no
just,
there's
I
no
know,
disagreement here.
I know. I think I'm on my soapbox and now I'm just on a tear.
Final thoughts about MAUS.
It is a very powerful piece of work. It is an incredible piece of work. And it says so much in very little space, right? This is not a tome, but so much is touched on in this graphic novel. There's so many themes in the book that we could have talked about, but we don't have like 18 days to talk about it
Well,
or
we
a wholesome.
could. I
Well,
mean,
well,
we
sure.
could talk as much as we want.
That's
Keep
true. That's
posting
true.
it.
I mean, you could spend a whole semester on
Yeah,
MAUS.
I feel like you could.
And I'm going to say this for probably every book in our series, but I think it should be required reading.
I think this was in some cases.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if it still is, but I think it was. It was used in curriculum
Mm-hmm.
around the United States.
Yeah. I would like to think there are still schools that are teaching it.
There probably are. And I think it's comic book form
Mm-hmm.
really makes it accessible to your high school level students.
Mm-hmm.
Reading something in a different format from a different
Mm-hmm.
point of view. I think that the relationship between Art Spiegelman and his father really is a story unto itself
Mm-hmm.
of what it is to be a survivor's child,
Mm-hmm.
of what it is to have this as part of your genetics, of what it is to live with a survivor. And I agree with you about that being one of the hard parts of the book to read
Mm-hmm.
because it was almost repetitive, his inability to really get along with his dad. In fact, I heard him on a podcast talking about he and his dad hadn't been speaking to each other.
Mm-hmm.
They had been I don't know, what would you call it?
Estranged.
Estranged for a while. Art asking his father Vladek about the Holocaust was the only way he could have conversation with him.
Mm-hmm.
Otherwise, he couldn't stand his father,
Yeah.
which
Yeah.
is as my parents have aged and I've thought about their stories and trying to have these same types of conversations. I had a lot of empathy for Art, but I also had a lot of feelings like, dude, lighten up on your daddy, survive the fucking Holocaust,
Right.
like
Right. Yeah.
I felt the same thing. Like it was a little tough, but also I didn't have to live with the man, right? I
Right.
wasn't raised by the man. And trauma makes us do fucking weird shit. Sometimes
Mm-hmm.
old shit, not as loving as it could be, not as
Mm-hmm.
snuggly as it could be.
Mm-hmm.
Traumatized people, there's a lot of things that go wrong in relationships because of trauma.
Yeah.
I feel for Artie and his family and Vladek and Anya. And yeah, I'm with you. Everybody should read this book. If you listeners have not read MAUS, highly recommend it. It's a hard read, but it's really important.
Yeah. Yeah. And I just want to say one last thing about this being a graphic novel. And yeah, in that sense, yes, there's an easier entry point to it. But I think one thing that's really important about that is the saying, a picture tells a thousand words or something like that. There's so much in the pictures. Not, yeah. There's the dialogue and explanations, blah, blah, blah. But if you if you look at the pictures, each of the pictures on their own, there's so much more subtext that comes through. And I'm not saying I caught all the subtext, but I just think that that adds a whole other powerful layer to this story. There's the illustration of of Art's words and his feelings towards his father and Vladek's experiences and Vladek's words. And, you know, there's just so much to that. And, you know, there's just so much about art in the written form and the visual form, the musical form. I mean, all of it, art in all of its ways is so important and it's so key that you could read this book 10 times over and pick up different things every single time.
Oh yeah. On page 174, it won't be the right page
Yeah,
for you, but
yeah.
it's from the second
Oh, the second volume.
second volume. It
Okay.
was one of my favorite scenes. Art and his wife, I think they're married at the time.
Hmm.
They just get a call and they need to leave to go be with Vladek. And a couple dogs, so a couple Americans say, "What a pity you just got up here." And Art says, "We'll be back. We're not taking much luggage, so we have an excuse not to stay long." So then the two, Art and his wife, get in the car and he says, "Vladek sounded half hysterical on the phone. Poor guy, I feel so sorry for him." And then Art says, "Yeah, me too, till I have to spend any time with him. Then he drives me crazy." His wife says, "Hmm." He says, "Sigh." And then he says, "Depressed again. Just thinking about my book, it's so presumptuous of me. I mean, I can't even make any sense out of my relationship with my father. How am I supposed to make any sense out of Auschwitz, of the Holocaust? When I was a kid, I used to think about which one of my parents I'd let the Nazis take to the ovens if I could only save one of them. Usually I save my mother. Do you think that's normal?" And his wife says, "Nobody's normal."
Nobody's normal.
It's such a layered book. There's
Hmm.
just so much relationship. It's a beautiful book.
Hmm. Yeah. I'm really glad that we read it. And I'm gonna say that probably about every single book.
We're going to keep reading.
We're gonna keep reading and we're going to keep encouraging other people to keep reading.
We encourage you to keep reading and we encourage you to write us a 5-star review.
Thanks, Jennifer.
Bye, Raquel.
Bye.
Thanks, Art Spiegelman.
Thanks for listening to today's episode. If you like this episode, please share it with a friend.
Or you could leave us a comment and a 5-star review or email us at madnesscafepodcast@gmail.com.
Thanks, everybody.